Hello and welcome to episode 2 of this podcast. In the first episode, we have discussed some critical questions related to how the Indian space ecosystem is, what are the kind of initiatives that are there, what are the kind of developments we have observed, and where the startup ecosystem is going. So now we'll be taking a deep dive into more of the commercial market, the defense applications, as well as what to expect in 2025 too. So Chaitanya, welcome to the podcast again. It was a very interesting conversation in the part one of the episode, and we are continuing from that part where we left. That is the Indian space startup ecosystem. So, coming to the point of commercialization, so from your perspective, what progress have Indian space companies made in tapping into commercial space market, and in general, from your perspective, do you even see any growth in satellite launches, communication networks, or any other space market verticals in 2024?
You know, the Indian startups, barring a few, are mostly right now in their infancy. They are just learning to crawl. They are just learning to pick up stuff, like any typical infant. So I haven't seen any of them uh, doing something that is tangible, that is of immediate need to the various contractors that they can cater to. And I haven't seen a urge within them to communicate to the world what exactly they are wanting to do. So most of their communication is over glorified. Most of the communication on social media is about just putting out successes, just attending a few conferences here and there, exhibitions here and there, clicking photographs, signing of MOUs that nobody really cares of, even them, and they are stuck in a rigmarole right now. They need to come out of this rigmarole because time is running fast. Uh, Not only for them, but there is a lot at stake when the government encourages them. When the government encourages them, it becomes a responsibility for these startups to think of themselves first as government contractors. They could be defense contracts, they could be civilian contracts, but they need to think of themselves as providers of certain kind of technologies or services to various arms of the government. And they also need to think of themselves as diplomatic levers that government can use so that the government benefits in certain bilateral relations or certain plurilateral relations, and yet at the same time offer these bilateral and plurilateral contracts end up offering these companies, these startups, the necessary business revenue. None of these startups are looking at themselves in this manner. I see no positive communication. I only see photo ops. I only see just positive media share, and perhaps many of these startups need to rethink. As I told you in your previous episode, most of them are now 7, 8, 9 years old. Some of them have surpassed
Yes.
the 10-year-old startup milestone. They need to start thinking very seriously. And on the government side, the government must also think now that they have been encouraging startups for over the past 10 years or so. Which are the space startups that they need to continue encouraging, and they must
Yes.
also pick and choose now that if a certain startup is delivering on certain milestones, then they would get the necessary support and attention of the government. If some of these startups have failed to deliver, the government need not pay attention to them anymore, because just like sports stars, just like professionals like us, if we are faltering, if we are going astray, then we have to go back to the drawing board.
Yes.
So I believe a large number of startups need to go back to the drawing board, reassess and restructure, or even in some cases shut shops, because none of them are delivering. Okay, in the space sector, many of the startups, exploit an excuse, and that excuse is, okay, space is long gestation technology development domain. It takes time. It takes a lot of money. No, you don't have that kind of excuse. You need to develop uh, within the finite resources available, and you need to develop within the finite time available. No company in the world of any kind has the luxury of time and money. So
Yes.
you can't be sitting ducks. You need to deliver. You need to deliver beyond the rose tinted picture that these companies are creating for themselves. So I am of the belief that both the government as well as the other end users need to think of these startups, need to evaluate them, vet them on a regular basis. I'm sure their venture capital investors, the equity investors, are vetting them, but I'm not sure about the parameters on which these VC firms are evaluating them from time to time.
Yes.
So everybody needs to rethink now, because we are now entering into a really grim phase of uh, global geopolitics. Just today, you had the Russian president stating publicly that the world is at war with the Russian world, with Russia. So
Yep.
the word war has been used from the highest Russian office. Likewise, there are geopolitical hotspots elsewhere. There's a hotspot brewing in
Yes.
Syria. There's a hotspot brewing in along the Israeli other frontiers, in Sudan, in
Yes.
Ethiopia, in South China Sea, along the Indian eastern frontiers, and along the Indo-Pakistani axis. So you have to keep all these things in mind, and the government is quite busy,
Yes.
troubleshooting all these issues. So you
Absolutely.
have to deliver, you have to ensure that your technology comes to the service, comes to the rescue of the underprivileged. You have to
Yes.
ensure that technology is of strategic use for the government as well as tactical use.
Absolutely. I agree with that point actually, especially the one that you mentioned about the finite resources. You know, coming from a military school background, I had heard some of my Indian Air Force seniors who are currently inside the force. They used to say this. I mean, Top Gun said it now very recently, but they say, it's not about the kind of high tech plane you have or a jet you have. It's about how a strategic pilot you are, or how of a good pilot or a trained pilot you are. So I think when it comes to entrepreneurship also, it is more about how badly you want to solve the problem than just craving about, okay, you need so much money, you need so much, so and so, backing or manpower. So I think that's the kind of mindset shift you need to have, where you really badly want to solve the problem. You don't really care what it takes or whatever you have within in your hands at the moment. You should be able to do it if you really want to solve the problem. So I think that mindset needs to be developed. So yeah, I agree with you on that point.
And also, in case of ISRO's brand perception, uh, working within finite set of resources, ISRO has delivered. So it is but natural for the world to expect from Indian startups that they would do the same, that they would deliver within the finite sets of resources available. But that's not the case.
Absolutely.
That's not the case.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned about ISRO especially, so I would like to kind of point towards that side. What role has the Indian government played in supporting the space industry during 2024? I mean, you mentioned some of the policies and related stuff, but looking at the kind of geopolitical movements that are happening, or possibly we can say the global crisis, if they at all come hitting along in the next few years, what are the kind of measures Indian government have taken or might take from your perspective to rescue the private space sector?
That's why I said, the financiers, which includes the government, will have to take a call in the next few months. I won't even say few quarters now. That you'll have to take a call who to encourage and who not to encourage.
Absolutely.
So, because again, the attention span, the bandwidth of attention that every startup takes from a certain governmental agency is actually a precious time.
Yes.
If not delivering onto it, then please, uh, there needs to be vetting done. And this is not just about space startups, it is about any kind of startup who is seeking grants, who's seeking, low interest rate loans, who's seeking VC funds from one or the other governmental schemes. You will have to
Absolutely.
deliver. You'll have to live up to the expectations from you, and you'll have to tame down the kind of bloated image that you're creating for yourselves. So tame down, restrict yourself, say that you're building an engine, say that you're building a small component of the engine, and we'll be fine with you. Rather than saying that, okay, we'll build the whole rocket for you, we'll build the whole satellite for you. It doesn't work that way. It does, there are so many, even within the European aerospace and defense ecosystem, there's so many companies who have thrived on expertise in certain
Yes.
components. Why is not the case in India, in the Indian startup ecosystem?
Yes.
Because everybody wants to be an Elon Musk. Rather,
Yes.
there is not enough space at the top now.
Yes.
And with the kind of population we have, with the kind of the number of startups that we have, there's only space for one Elon Musk. Perhaps there is no space for an Elon Musk in India, and
Yes.
Elon Musk can only happen in the United States and nowhere else. It may
Yeah.
be Elon Musk may be a good thing for the US. He may be a bad news for US,
Yeah.
but we've never had India never had one monopoly in any of the sectors
Absolutely.
like the
It
way
has
space
always
is.
been collaborative. Yeah. It has been always been collaborative, diverse.
Yeah, yeah. In case of South Korea, you have chaebols. In case of Japan, you have the zaibatsus. In case of India, you have the conglomerates.
Yes.
So you need to grow big. You need to aim for valuations to the tune of a few tens of thousands of crores. But for that to happen, you need to be component manufacturers, build hardware, build
Yes.
software, build niches for yourself.
Product developers. Yes.
Be product developers, be service
Yes.
providers, and don't speak in jargon.
Yes. That's very important. Yeah. And I mean, this points that you have mentioned, especially about the product being a product developer, it is very important because I see a lot of companies in the recent times have been surviving, especially even in the US market, not only, in the other markets of the world, even in the US markets. They have their own product lines, but they're not so much focused because 80% of the revenue comes from the government contracts. And what they offer, government contracts, is not actually a product, but they offer an on demand service which the government tender or that grant demands, which I feel is a downfall, because it kind of doesn't really uplift the innovation pace for the private sector in the industry. So, do you see kind of similar thing in the Indian ecosystem, or do you have any other thoughts on this?
I'll again give the American examples. So, from the aerospace sector, you had tremendous number of players back in the good old days,
Yeah.
1950s, 60s, in the US, who were building aircrafts. So the companies that were McDonnell Douglas and whatnot, they don't exist anymore. They got assimilated.
Yeah.
So they built a product line. They built really, really good products in those times. But eventually, these companies sort of shut shop. They sort of merged into a much bigger entity, which survived, which endured. And the companies that you see today, the Lockheed Martins, the Boeings, are a culmination of various companies that eventually got merged, like tributaries get merged into a large river. So
Yes.
if Indian companies, both MSMEs, SMEs, and startups, uh, they'll have to think of themselves as providers of certain technologies which will create a legacy for them. A, a,
Yes.
a a satellite is not a legacy. A
Yes.
launch vehicle is not a legacy. McDonnell Douglas used to run a aircraft, which called, I remember it was called Constellation. Uh, you don't see that aircraft anymore. But
Yes.
what went eventually into the companies that later acquired McDonnell Douglas was certain small components.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So
So,
that's a
so
kind of
you
similar thing. Yes.
that's kind of a thing that you need to work on. That
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, a rocket or a satellite is merely a platform, and that platform has to regularly undergo upgrades and evolutions. So, what have you done? Have you found out a cheaper alternative for the solar panels?
Yes.
Have you found out a cheaper alternative, a lighter alternative for the material that goes into the construction of a satellite bus?
Yes.
So, the startups, again, as I find, I won't blame them entirely for it, but there is another area which we have a lackadaisical communication right now is between the academia and startups.
Yes. That's a problem. I think that's not only for the space industry, but most of the
Yes,
industries as well.
most of the industry.
Yeah. 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 Yes.
So,
I agree.
whatever that helps you travel from technology readiness level 0, TRL 0, to TRL 3 or 4, that gap is missing. What are startups? Startups are those entities which work after the POC, after the proof of concept. But which is the technology, which is the science that you need to look into before the ideating and TRL 0 to TRL 3 phase? Uh, that is where the world lacks in most cases, and that is where Indian institutions also lack.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
and in space may help you from TRL 4 to TRL 8 9. And what InSpace has been given charge of is help the startups provide access to certain ISRO infrastructure for testing and standardization and whatnot. Now, testing standardization happens at TRL 7 8 9.
Yes.
But how do you help entrepreneur or an innovator in the early stages? That is missing. So just the way, so here's a recommendation that I want to give through you to whosoever is listening to your podcast is
Yes.
just the way American universities have three or four type of grants. So there is a sun grant, there is a land grant, there is a water grant, and there is a space grant. So these four or five types of grants are based on the kind of technologies that get developed for all these, if I may call it in Sanskrit, Panchatattva.
Yeah.
So, so,
Yes.
so
Elements. Yeah.
elements, the five elements. So, Indian Space Research Organization, it has a beautiful fund which is called as Respond. It's a grant which it gives to innovators in various universities. That Respond needs to articulate itself that okay, we are going to help you from TRL 0 to TRL 3, and once you reach TRL 3, the next stages of hand holding will be done by InSpace. I don't see that
Yes.
happening. So you will have to give space grants to not only the IITs or the ISERs in India, but also to the NITs but also to the central government universities, the state government universities, and in certain cases, also let go of some of your ISRO personnel to populate these universities.
Yes.
Why have them all in your own campuses? Just spread them
Yes.
all over. I
Absolutely.
met somebody from IIT Bombay. I'll just give you an anecdote. I just met somebody from IIT Bombay, a very nice professor there. He used to be ex ISRO.
Okay.
And he told me his story that when he decided to quit ISRO and come to the IIT for the professorship, his bosses, who were very fond of him, did not let him go that easily.
Okay.
Despite his transition was in the larger interest of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
His boss did not let him go easily. He had to persuade them twice, thrice. His applications were torn off and all that.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
there's a lot of emotional melodrama there, but you need to let go.
Yeah, that is true.
You need to let go. So you need to populate now Indian universities with talent that is in tune with ISRO's research
Yes.
requirements. And if you ask me, ISRO has already been told by the Prime Minister's office that you're going to focus only on R&D now,
Yes.
because commercialization is being taken up by in space. Spin-offs are being taken up by New Space India Limited, and the commercial sector is going to innovate on its own. So, not
Yeah.
to compete with the commercial sector, but do R&D which is not in the commercial realms, which is in the non-commercial realms.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
So,
that's an important thing you mentioned.
few social dynamics which are also at play here, and they need to be addressed. Space is not entirely about tech, space is not entirely about commerce, but it is also about how to social engineer your scientists
Yes.
and your ecosystem.
Absolutely. No, that's very true. I mean, especially when we talk about applications in disaster management and socio-economic aspect, that lens of socialism is very much important to engineer it for sure. And on the same lines, this is possibly the final part, I would say, of the conversation. And I'll keep this completely up to you to answer it from your individual perspective, based on what you expect and what we have seen this year. So, from your perspective, what should we expect in 2025 for the Indian space sector in general, whether it's government or private, or even it's in the civil area applications of the space domain? And from the current scenario or the landscape that we just spoke about, we very well dissected it on a level of finances as well. So based on this discussion and from your individual perspective, what are your thoughts and what to expect in 2025? And even you can give us a brief outlook on beyond also, if you'd like to, beyond 2025 as well.
I believe 2025 is the year when the Indian space ecosystem will most likely undergo course correction. Uh, that course correction may happen because of a black swan event, which none of us can sort of predict at this point in time.
Yes.
But you can definitely, if you use your sixth sense, you can definitely preempt that there's something that is going to happen this year. We don't know, and which is going to change a lot of perspectives about a lot of things. So,
Yes.
space domain is definitely, and this is going to happen world over, that it is definitely going to undergo some kind of catharsis. That is one.
Yes.
Two is, I believe India will have to look inwards when it comes to financing of the commercial ecosystem. Uh,
Yes.
uh, like I've been telling you, every stakeholder of this ecosystem has a steep learning curve, including you and me. We have a lot to learn, and uh,
Yes.
2025 will be really challenging for all of us, and thereafter too.
Absolutely.
So the challenges are only going to increase year after year. Uh, until there is a time of relative peace and calm. So,
Absolutely.
given all these, you know, good and bad possibilities, we'll have to be really mindful of the kind of resources that we are consuming, the kind of resources that we are giving back after that consumption. So,
Absolutely.
this is not a time to faff around.
Yes. And I think I would like to just add a point to it and reiterate what I tell to my network always through the conversation of the podcast and of the podcast as well. That is, no matter which country it is, whether it's India, whether it's the United States, whether it's South Korea or France as well, when the government allocates you some funds or provides you a contract, it's the taxpayers' money. So please try to respect the taxpayers' money. I would like to tell this to even, of course, the existing entrepreneurs, but the new age of entrepreneurs or the new people who are trying to enter the space sector as an entrepreneur. So please take care of that. It's the taxpayers' money. So you really have to give them back something or deliver on the kind of promises that you keep with them. That is very much important.
Very true.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, thank you very much, Chaitanya, for wonderful insights on this topic. I think this is a kind of a topic we are also going to discuss in a much more detailed manner, but on more on the facts and figures with ASD Eurospace, which is kind of a think tank of European Space Agency, trying to deep dive into the conversation. So it's great that this episode provided kind of a benchmark. It's kind of preparing for the oncoming, I would say, reality check that is going to happen with the ASD Eurospace. So the listeners are kind of, getting warm up with this episode, I would say, with this two-part episode. And once again, I think it's always great to catching up with you, having this interesting conversation, and I hope to record more such insightful episodes with you next year. That is just in next 2 weeks. So yeah, thank you very much.